Sean, what do you make of Putin's threat to NATO countries about sending in troops? I mean, it isn't necessarily on the cards that NATO would send troops into Ukraine, but this certainly is a warning he's made before.
It is, and there's a bit of sabre rattling going on here, and there's always a danger that it's cry wolf, isn't it? The more times you do it. But this is the opportunity for President Putin to address Parliament. It's worth putting that in context. In 2 weeks' time, obviously, presidential elections are due, and perhaps inevitably, part of what he was talking about today was for a domestic audience, but part of it very firmly was for an international audience. And as you say, it follows President Macron of France that had hinted that there might be the opportunity of putting boots on the ground, whether NATO or French, into Ukraine, and largely because they're running out of options with weapons support. So how do you do something to turn the dial? And of course, Putin absolutely took this opportunity to say, if NATO gets involved, there will be an escalation. But it's worth remembering, you know, that over the last 2 years, Russia has consistently tried to deter the West from getting involved. When we provided anti-tank weapons at the start, it was an escalation, then it was tanks, then it was long-range missiles. Each time it might have delayed the West, but it didn't actually stop them. But it's also worth pointing out, he also talked about bolstering the defences on the western border, because as you can see here, with Finland and Sweden recently joining, it's massively expanded the border between Russia and NATO, and therefore he's framing that as a heightened threat. And he also made the point that Russian forces are at readiness, and what he means by that is that don't mess with me, otherwise I'll press the button.
So a message to the West, but also a message domestically, you know, in terms of what he's thinking, in terms of the war in Ukraine and the fact that it is an election year.
Yeah, no, so increasingly, I tend to watch the body language of Putin on some of these things. It felt like a more confident President Putin. It gave a rare insight into what Russian people, the diet they're fed, because it was the world according to him. He said that the majority of Russians supported the special military operation. He said their military have gained the initiative on the battlefields. They've gained invaluable combat experience. But he also took the opportunity to highlight technology that Russia is bringing to bear. In other words, how powerful that is. And he highlighted the Zircon hypersonic missile. This is it being tested. But it's actually been used quite effectively very early in its time and development. So we've got a picture of the missile here, and it's a pretty 21st century missile. There's not many of them, but he did highlight just how effective this Mark 8 missile had been at striking targets. Now, all this is part of trying to make Russia great again. It's not embattled, it's growing. This economy actually grew last year by 3.6%. It actually outgrew America and the EU, and that was despite Western sanctions. Looking into that, there are 16,500 Western sanctions in place. It's a phenomenal number. And he argued that a strong Russia was necessary for a strong global order. He blamed the US for trying to interfere, for trying to inflict a strategic defeat. But he also said that Russia was, of course, ready to talk to the West, apparently.